we say a lot of Republican controlled states are really bad when it comes to human rights and civil rights and all of these things. That's taken a step. They've taken a step up. All right. They've turned the racism to 11 in lots of these states. One of the big reasons is because they hate it that black people and, other people in general were able to make it out to vote. One of the big Republican ways for winning the election now is not winning the most amount of votes necessarily, because they can't really do that anymore. It's really hard for them to do that, especially on the national stage. There just aren't that many of them, and people don't necessarily want to be voting for Republicans. They just don't. They don't do good things. Why would you be voting for them? It's now, instead of winning people over, it's restricting how many people can vote. The game is making it so hard to vote, making as few people be able to vote as possible, be able to, make as a few people be able to vote as possible. That is the new game that they're playing, because they can't win in a free and fair open election like they used to. They've been passing a plethora of laws all across the country, especially after Joe Biden's win, because they saw what happens when they don't do it. They lost Trump lost, and now Trump's gonna be bite off their heads because they weren't throwing away their entire career trying to protect his ass, trying to make sure that he got voted, trying to steal the election. Basically, he's mad that they didn't steal the election. So if they can't do that, they can do one thing, which is for the next election, make sure that it's as hard as possible that people can vote. And so yesterday, as of this recording, wait, was that yesterday? My bad. A couple of days ago, as of this recording, a congresswoman was arrested in Georgia trying to watch on as Brian Kemp, Georgia's governor, signed a sweeping and authoritarian and Jim Crow-esque election bill into office. We can touch on that in a second, but I want to show you this video of this poor woman just trying to do her job.
Why does she have to step back?
The governor is signing a bill that affects all Georgians. Why is he doing it in private, and why is he trying to keep elected officials who are representing us out of the process?
Exactly.
I know you don't have any control over anything other than suppressing people's right to vote and using your guns and your abilities to talk.
Yeah, you said you give her one more time, like you're going to do something. Are you serious?
No, you are not. Represent.
No. She's not under arrest.
For what? Under arrest for what? For trying to see something that our governor is doing? Our governor is signing a bill that affects all Georgians, and you're going to arrest an elected representative. Why does the governor have more power than a representative? Why are you arresting her?
That's what I'm asking.
Stop arresting her.
Why are you arresting
Why?
her?
Cite the violation. Cite the code. What is she in violation of? I want you to cite the code. Cite the code. Cite it. What are you? Cite the code. Cite the code. Cite the code. Why are you arresting her? Under what? Under what?
Back up. Get out of the way.
Under what law are you arresting her? Why are you arresting her? Why are you arresting her? Tell us now. Why are you arresting her? Cite it. Give me a reason why you are arresting her.
Okay, so this is what's going down in Georgia. A little background. So basically, this is one of the youngest, if not the youngest, congressperson in Georgia right now, in the Georgia legislature, and also one of the only openly homosexual, if I remember correctly, members of the Republican legislature as well. Members of the Georgia legislature as well, controlled by Republicans. And she was trying to get into the process where Brian Kemp was signing the bill, and they arrested her for merely knocking on the door. They took her in, they booked her, and they also charged her with a couple of crimes. One being knowingly and intentionally knocking on Kemp's door and stomping on an officer's foot 3 times. Man, would you look at that? stomping on an officer's foot. What an absolute, what a crime against humanity, even. Poor guy. And Senator Warnock flew back down to the state to talk to his people outside of the jail that Miss Cannon was being held.
Today is a very sad day for the state of Georgia.
Yes, it is.
I am Park Cannon's pastor. I know her. She's a very intelligent woman and a very dignified and committed public servant. And what we have witnessed today is a desperate attempt
We'll mess up with
to
the audio.
lock
Sorry.
out democracy. In this case,
Oh, is the rest of it on?
they're literally being locked down.
Oh my gosh.
Voices of
I didn't think the rest of it was messed up. Oh no. I just thought it was I just went over this. Oh, that sucks. Here, 1 second. Let me see if I can find a better here, 1 second. A better video of Warnock talking outside the jail. Can I find it? Here, let's see. Warnock. Oh no, man, that sucks. Well, okay. If that's not the case, we got basically the gist of it at the beginning there. So basically, what he was going on about is that so he flew down. He was in front of the jail that Park Cannon, that's the Congresswoman that we're talking about right now, was taken to, was being held custody by the police for hours until she was finally released outside of Fulton County Jail, because this is in the state capital. Let's go over a couple of things, okay? So why was this happening? So in Georgia, if you remember, Joe Biden won it. Joe Biden won for a couple of reasons. And also they lost both of their Republican Congress members. They lost both of them because people actually came out to vote. That's one of the really big things. It was a coordinated attempt to make sure that people had the right and the ability to exercise those rights, to vote and vote their conscience and vote Donald Trump out of office, to make sure he would not receive the presidency once again in a free and fair election. They're pissed about it. They were so mad and upset that people were allowed to express their ability to vote that they decided to pass a bill that is one of the most restrictive voting rights bills in the entire country. Let's read about it a little bit. This is people talking about what Park Cannon's arrest felt like. It reminded us of the 50s and 60s in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, and South Carolina, Cannon's attorney Greg Griggs said. But I think the governor needs to understand that we're not going to sit back on George Wallace type tactics and not respond the same way we respond to George Wallace. So I think the rest of the country needs to take a very strong look at the tactics that are being used in Georgia. And the Justice Department needs to get involved. There needs to be a passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to protect the voting rights, and we need the Justice Department to crack down on the tactics that these local and state officials are using to try and silence voters and silence people. She has access to all parts of the people's house, so there was no indication that the ceremony should have been closed off. Many times when a governor signs a bill that's going into law, it's open to the public and the press, and to other members of the House of Representatives and the state Senate. There is no reason why Cannon should have been outside of that room if she wanted to get in. Every single time that a governor is signing the bill, that office is open, so representatives, Senate members, the press can go in and watch. This one wasn't. You know why? Because they're ashamed of the shit that they're passing. The ability for people to reach in and see what's actually going on, what they're actually doing to people, is not something that they want to bring attention to. So instead of that, they try and deflect and hide as many of the ugly parts of what they're doing as possible. It's really hard to do it because the entire thing stinks. This is Jim Crow in the 21st century, and it must end, Biden said the day after Brian Kemp signed the bill into law. I will take my case to the American people, including Republicans who joined the broadest coalition of voters ever to pass the election and put the country before the party. If we have the best ideas, if you have the best ideas, you have nothing to hide. Let the people vote. But they don't have the best ideas, and they want to make sure as few people vote as possible. Several black leaders described the legal skirmish to come as an existential fight for representation, saying that the law clearly puts a target on black and brown voters. Protests against the voting restrictions unfolded this week in the state capitals like Austin, Texas, and Atlanta. More lawsuits are expected. In more than 24 states, Republican-led legislatures are advancing bills in a broad political effort that is the most aggressive attack on the right to vote since the civil rights movement in the 1960s. It follows months of Republicans' efforts to tarnish Mr. Biden's presidential victory, which scores high-level GOP officials which scores of high-level GOP officials are still refusing to acknowledge as legitimate. Democrats who have limited power in many state capitals are looking to Mr. Biden and Congress and congressional Democrats for a new federal law to protect voting. So this is exactly what we need, okay? As a black person, okay? And as someone who understands the plight of marginalized people in this country, I understand that we cannot allow Republicans to do whatever they want when it comes to voting. We can't do it. Even on that point, we can't allow states to do whatever they want when it comes to voting. They cannot handle it, because when you allow them to do whatever they want, what do? They take rights away from as many people as possible, because more people voting is not beneficial to Republicans. When voting goes up, Republicans' margin of victory goes down, and negative, as you see in like Arizona and Georgia. They lose. They don't want people to vote, so they restrict it as hard as possible, make it as difficult as possible. A law similar to this got struck down in North Carolina, if I remember correctly. In North Carolina, they passed a bill that basically what they did was they looked at demographics. Okay, they took demographic data, and they took all of the ways that black people vote, and they made it difficult to do that. So black people use this certain ID, state official ID, instead of this ID. And so what they did is they made the ID that black people used in a disproportionate amount. They made it not eligible to be used when it comes to voting. What else did they do? They looked at the times when black people vote. And what they did was they made it so lots of black people absentee vote. So they made absentee voting. They shortened the amount of time that you can absentee vote, making sure that more black people's votes when they go through the mail makes it less likely for them, their votes to actually be counted. They did a whole bunch of things, and thankfully got struck down by their Supreme Court for saying that it surgically targeted black people, because that's exactly what they did. But now they want to take another bite at the apple. They want to make sure that they can restrict as many people to vote as possible. They love what Jim Crow did, and the Civil Rights Act only made it harder for them to get into power. Republicans have been slipping, and they need a way back. Instead of convincing people, they make it so that your voice doesn't actually make it to the ballot box. So let's talk about what this bill kind of does. It shifts the power and oversight of elections to the legislature by stripping the Secretary of State from chairing on the Board of Elections and authorizing the legislature to name members to the board. It further empowers the State Board of Elections to have sweeping jurisdiction over the county election boards, including the authority to suspend officials. So now, if you aren't cracking down on policies as hard as they want you to, they can now throw you out and put in a new politician there to take your place and make voting as hard as possible for these people, as per the new bill. The Republican legislatures in more than 40 states have introduced hundreds of bills targeting voting access and seizing authority over administrating elections. So lots of elections are handled by counties, but they want to stop this from happening, because counties, they can be sympathetic to people. They can be like, oh, we let's extend our voting hours. They don't want that to happen. Lots of these states are controlled. Lots of state legislatures are controlled by Republicans, and so they want to make sure that they have as much power as possible to restrict as many as possible when it comes to voting. Let's talk about what the Democrats are doing. So they mentioned the congressional Democrats. This is one thing that they can do. Thankfully, in Congress, lots of Democrats have been able to make it there, and lots of Democrats, the Democrats have a trifecta right now, a very small one, but they have it. So they have the ability to pass a new, basically 1964 Voting Rights Act 2, Electric Boogaloo, and push it through Congress and make it so that we can actually stop states from restricting these votes. Thankfully, the House actually passed a bill. It came through 220 to 210, mostly along party lines, and it aims to impose new national requirements, weakening restrictive state voter ID laws, mandate automatic voter registration, and expand early mail-in voting, and make it harder to purge voter rolls and restore voting rights to former felons, which is incredibly important. If you served your time, now personally, I don't think your voting rights should ever be taken away, but since we still take voter rights away, I think if you served your time in jail, you should be able to vote again. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. If you are a citizen, again, free outside of a prison, you should be able to vote, period. This shouldn't be controversial. Changes that studies suggest would increase voter participation, especially among racial minorities. So would you look at that? In lots of these Republican-controlled states, here's the double whammy with what they do, all right? They make more crimes, especially crimes that lots of minorities may commit. They make more crimes eligible to have your voting rights taken away. And they keep you in jail where you can't vote, all right? And once you're out of jail, you may not be able to vote, and you may have to pay back certain fines and fees that will take a long time to do before you get your rights back. And then they restrict voting even more. So they crack down on crime, making it less likely that you vote. And then they crack down on voting, making it less likely for you to vote. It's just they're trying every single angle they can to institute laws to make sure that you don't vote. They don't play the game anymore. They don't play the political game anymore. Our institutions were set up to make it so that people actually, our institutions were set up believing that people were actually going to abide by them, actually do the politics, right? How do you have politics with someone who doesn't care to actually do it, who doesn't actually care to play by the rules in the system, right? Instead of convincing people of your political ideology, stop people from voting who are against you in the first place. That doesn't make any sense to me. Well, as someone who cares about democracy, it doesn't make any sense to me. But for people who don't, it makes perfect sense because it's the easiest thing to do. You don't have to change your messaging. You don't have to appeal to anybody. You don't have to walk any fine lines. Just make it so that they can't express their opinions. And all of a sudden, you have complete control over politics. It's ridiculous and it has to stop. It's starting with Georgia and it's spreading all across the country. Where Republicans have any control over any legislatures. I know for a fact here in Kentucky, it's going to be spreading even more. Our legislature will probably be pushing bills similar to this once they get the right idea. Thankfully, we have a Democratic governor who will, veto stuff like that. But lots of other states don't have those safeguards, Georgia included, safeguards against the states cracking down on people being able to vote. And this is why we need the federal government to step in again. States, a lot of the times, cannot be trusted with upholding civil rights. They have proven it time and time again. They have no care when it comes to civil rights. They do what's most beneficial to them, and if that means trampling all over people's rights and liberties, then they'll do it in the blink of an eye. This has to be stopped, and it has to come down from the Senate. Biden and the Democrats have to step in to stop them, or else we're going to be seeing a new resurgence in Jim Crow laws very soon. That thing about paying prison fees to get voting rights back should be unconstitutional since it's a poll tax. I'm not sure on the legality of it. I'm not sure how the Supreme Court has voted on that, but it sounds exactly like a poll tax. It is basically a poll tax. We're not shift democracy. We're a democratic republic. Well, I mean, what happened to that democratic part of the republic? Like people being able to vote. You forgot about that? It's ridiculous, dude. It's so sad. That this Congresswoman had to be locked up for merely trying to view her governor trying to take her rights away and the rights of her constituents away. But that's the world a hell of a world we live in, a hell of a world where conservatives are allowed to do stuff like this. Hell of a world.